Welcome back to another episode of the Kings Pulse podcast presented by the Kings Herald. My name is Brendan Nunez, and I am recording this episode today solo. I'm recording this the morning after the Sacramento Kings just beat the Orlando Magic at the Golden One Center, 142 to 130. Definitely an offensive focused game. Not much defense played from either side in this one, but the Kings did come out on top. 142 points is a ridiculous number to put up. 54% from the field, 44% from three, and they shot 25 free throws. They made 21 of them. I thought that this was one of the, if not the best De'Aaron Fox game that we've seen all year. This was the only second chance that Alvin Gentry has had in the now 8 games since he's taken over, which he's 5 and he was 4-3. So yeah, he's 5-3 actually in the 8 games now since he's taken over. This is the second time that he's had a fully available roster. The first one being that game against Philadelphia where they lost to a 76ers team that was missing 5 starters on their own. But Gentry had just taken over head coaching responsibilities the day before that game. It's hard to place that one on Gentry, I guess is what I'm saying. Also not trying to pitch this idea that Gentry's a savior or anything like that, but it's going well. And like I said, first chance aside from the very next day that he was named interim head coach after Walton was let go of, that he's had a full roster. And that is because Harrison Barnes returned from a foot injury and Maurice Harkless was available after a knee issue that he'd been dealing with for a couple games now. But he did end up not playing in this one. And excuse my dogs in the background. Harkless did end up not playing in this one. And some of it had to do with, Gentry said post-game that, if we could get away with not playing him, we were going to, pretty much. So that's what happened. I wouldn't say that it seemed like less of like Gentry views Harkless as outside the rotation. We don't know. It was definitely pitched by Gentry as, we were going to get away with not playing him if we could. And that's what they felt like they were able to do against Orlando. But all those guys available, unfortunately, Rashawn Holmes did take a hit to the eye that ended up being pretty bloody. I'm sure most people, if you watch the game, are able to remember that one pretty well. It's not the first time he's gotten hit in the eye. And so he ended up going out. I want to say it was in the second quarter and not returning in this one. His status is still uncertain. We didn't get any news on that post game. And as of today, when I'm recording this before 1 o'clock here, we still have no news what the latest is on Rashawn Holmes, but obviously, hopefully he can come back as soon as possible. He's been the clear number 1 big on this roster. Alex Len was the backup 5 of Gentry's choice against Orlando. But once Holmes went down, obviously Tristan Thompson was called upon as well. And Thompson played phenomenal in his minutes out there. Overall, I think that this was one of the most fun Kings games. Like, obviously, I wish that they were playing better defense. I think that very easily everyone's going to feel that way about this game. But the energy that we saw from this game, Haliburton has been a high energy guy all year, really. Like, his passion that you see on the court, and I'm not saying other guys are not passionate, so maybe that's a bad word, but the way that you see Haliburton constantly smiling, screaming, yelling, hyping up the crowd is just really fun to watch. Like, you can see him having fun. We've seen Thompson have that energy throughout the year, him getting a big opportunity and making some big plays in this one at crucial moments allowed him to display that energy and have some fun a little bit as well. He hit a big and one at the end of the game when it looked like Orlando might make a run to make it interesting at the end. Fell on the floor flexing, and Tyrese came up and punched him on the ground a couple of times playfully just to kind of hype him up. Fox played, like I said, what is probably the best game of his season. You saw him smiling a couple times after these fast break runs. He ended up with 33 points, 3 rebounds, only 1 assist, but also a steal, a block in this one. In 33 points in 33 minutes on 12 of 18 from the field, 2 of 2 from 3, and 7 of 8 from the free throw line. Gentry is very clear that he thinks the best asset that the Sacramento Kings team has is their pace. And or well, I should say their speed. And because of that, he believes that they should have an extremely high pace. We also heard McNair, when they made the change from Walton to Gentry, say that he thinks the Kings can be the fastest team in the league, that they were already paying fast, but he thought they could be faster, even the fastest team in the league. And we've seen the pace push nonstop. Like I said, that was the case a bit with Walton, but we've seen it even more so since Gentry's taken over. It is nonstop pushing the ball, make or miss. And I think that's been really beneficial for Fox. In the games since Gentry has taken over, De'Aaron Fox is averaging 22.6 points, 4.3 assists, 4.5 rebounds on 48% from the field, 35% from three, and 81% from the free throw line. So, not quite up to that 25 point per game mark that we saw last year. There are two different 30-point games in there, one of them being that triple overtime against the Lakers, where Fox played 52 minutes. But still, I think that we've seen these coast-to-coast kind of trademark De'Aaron Fox transition finishes that we hadn't seen in a way that I felt like a lot of people wanted beforehand. So Fox has been good. But I want to kind of point out, before I go into some of the trends that we've seen recently, guys that have or have not been playing well, and some rotational notes, I guess I'll say. I just want to get into this idea that, like, Alvin Gentry's first chance at continuity and how much that matters, because the last time that the Kings had a consistent rotation where it was known, these are the guys that are going to play on a given night, was the beginning of the year, the first 10 games where Sacramento ended up going 5-5. And we hear a reference to this beginning stretch of the season all the time as, we've heard it from Gentry, we've heard it from McNair, we've heard it from some of the players as like, we've shown how good we can be. And they're talking about that beginning stretch of the year. And I think what's important is that they didn't have any injuries during that time, aside from the second game of the season where Mo Harkless was unavailable. But in every game aside from that one with Mo, the starting lineup was Fox, Haliburton, Barnes, Harkless, and Holmes. And you knew that Buddy Hield and Davion Mitchell were going to get at least 20 minutes off the bench. You knew that one of Alex Leonard, Tristan Thompson was going to play. And then you knew that Terence Davis you might see him for a little while. He had a little bit more variability than these other guys, but he never played more than 15 minutes per night, aside from the one game he started because Harkless was unavailable. And then he slowly faded out of the rotation because he was shooting extremely poorly. But we knew what the rotation was going to be, and Walton caught some slack for what became an eight-man rotation, but it was working well. They, again, 5-5 doesn't sound super impressive, but you have to account for the schedule that they were up against. They played Utah twice, Golden State once, Phoenix is in there. Those are the top teams in the league in the West, like the clear top 3 teams in the West. And that was 4 out of those 10 games. And then the other ones thrown in there, Portland, Dallas, New Orleans, Charlotte, Indiana, not pushover games. New Orleans, you could say, obviously, I guess there's 2 New Orleans games, so take that for what you will. But those first 10 games often referenced as what we've shown that we're capable of. And that is when the lineup had consistency. After those 10 games, Tyrese Haliburton went down with a minor injury. With Haliburton out, the Kings fell to Phoenix after scoring 12 points in the third quarter. And then they almost came back in that game, mainly on the shoulders of Chimezie Metu and Damian Jones, who got put in the game in the middle of the third, looking for some energy. Walton was looking for some energy, and those guys played well and ended up closing the game, or at least playing big minutes in the fourth as well. I believe Damian Jones did close. I want to say both those guys did from my memory, but I could be a little off there. I know they played really big minutes in the third and fourth quarters there. They were the reason that the Kings had an opportunity to win that game. It was the Harrison Barnes and one call that was challenged and then reversed and shown to be a charge. or else the Kings would have had an opportunity to win that game. But no Haliburton. And then we saw the next game, they started their road trip, went to San Antonio, this infamous road trip against subpar opponents, right? Started their road trip, went to San Antonio, and got embarrassed. So all of a sudden, Walton decides to put Chimezie Metu in the starting lineup in place of Harkless. Haliburton had come back. There were no injuries anymore. Like Haliburton was the only one. He was coming back in Oklahoma City that next game after playing San Antonio. And Luke Walton decided to move Chimezie Metu in the starting lineup in place of Maurice Harkless. He said it was something that, we're going to try for 5 games to kind of see how it works, because our rebounding is so bad that we have to try and fix that. And before that, Metu was getting a lot of DNP CDs. Like I said, he played that game against Phoenix, but there were plenty of games earlier in the season he was not playing. Harkless, meanwhile, was in the starting lineup, and he went from starter to DNP CDs. So they kind of swapped roles there, and I think that it probably hurt Sacramento's defense a little bit. It changed the lineup dynamics. So then we know what happened on that road trip. The Kings went 1-4 with Metu in the starting lineup, and not all of those were on the road. Not all of those were on the road. And that led right into Walton being fired. So then, and also Bagley was starting to get rotational minutes during that road trip as well. Walton really started to try and change things because he felt like the rebounding was so bad that needed to be fixed. And once those changes started to be made, I think the team started to struggle. And then now under Gentry, it feels the Kings are more focused on playing to their strengths, finding their strengths and playing their brand of basketball, rather than worried about, oh man, we've been really bad at rebounding. We got to make some lineup changes to try and clean that up. I just don't think that's what we're going to see from Gentry. I don't think that he is going to overlook issues or anything like that, but it seems like what we've heard is that it's more important to figure out what we are going to be good at and make sure that we are good at those things than to clean up our weaknesses. The quote that we got from Haliburton at practice was, "It's just playing Sacramento Kings basketball." I think the biggest thing Alvin has preached through our last 3 or 4 games is worrying about ourselves. We're taking care of ourselves and making others adapt to us. So what they're good at, obviously, is pace and running in transition, which a lot of that has to do with getting defensive stops. Mentioned a lot on the last episode how Gentry wants them to force more turnovers for the sake of increased transition opportunities. That's something that's where Mo Harkless has value on the offensive end. He shoots very quickly, and he shot at a really poor percentage this year, which will clean up a little bit, but defenses just completely ignore him on when he's in the corner, when he's at the 3-point line or anything like that, which hurts the spacing. But he's probably the best low man defender, weak side defender that this Sacramento Kings team has. And the more stops that they can get, the more transition opportunities that they're going to get. So that's where Harkless brings some value on the offensive end. Harrison Barnes needs to be getting shots up at an aggressive rate. Earlier in the year, we heard Luke Walton say he wants Barnes to shoot 6 threes a game, and that was happening, and Barnes was playing like a freaking all-star, borderline top 10 guy in the league, but it was for a short stretch. And then all of a sudden, Chimezie Metu came in the lineup, and maybe it's not exactly correlated to that, but Barnes started to slow down a little bit and lessen those attempts more to what we were used to from last season. And I think that Barnes should be able to keep up his attempts. He just returned again against Orlando with that foot issue. And, it's hard to judge. Gentry was saying he's not worried about the box score for Barnes in this one since it's his first game back, but I'll throw it out there anyways. 30 minutes, which is a lot when you're just returning from injury, but 16 points, 5 rebounds, 3 assists, and a steal, no turnovers in there. 5 of 11 from the field, including 2 of 4 from deep. I need Barnes shooting at least 6 threes a night, like Walton said. I think he could get up 8 tonight because this team needs spacing, and Haliburton and Barnes are the clear best 2 3-point shooters on this team after Buddy Hield, who's been struggling, which we'll get into in a little while. But Barnes and Haliburton do more on offense as well, do more on just all around aside from shooting than Buddy does. So if those guys can get up threes at a really good volume and be confident and very quick in their decisions to let it fly, that way opponents are forced to stay closer to them and not be able to help off so often. I think it'll do a lot for the penetration ability of both of those guys, of Rashawn Holmes, De'Aaron Fox primarily, obviously. But yeah, Barnes returning has been nice. Not going to hold his performance against Orlando under. Not going to dive into it all too much. Just returning, but need to see him get up more shots. And yeah, I mean, it's just very notable that since in the 7 games since Gentry's been promoted, this does not include the Orlando game, Barnes missed 5 of them. Harkless missed 4, and those overlapped. Bagley was unavailable for 2 of them, also during that same stretch that Mo and HB were down. And for a team that already severely lacks wing depth, like, where are you going to look to at that point? And that's why we saw Chimezie Metu. We saw some Lou King. We saw Terence Davis in some extreme small ball lineups with 4 guards. And also during that stretch, Rashawn Holmes missed 3 games. And it looks like we don't know what's going to be the case with Holmes moving forward. But in just those amount of games, 7 since Gentry's been promoted, HB missed 5, Mo missed 4, Bagley missed 2, Holmes missed 3. Like, Gentry is just getting his first chance to establish a consistent rotation, which I think is going to be very important for the Kings moving forward to find. He knows what he wants the identity of this team to be. It seems like, again, utilizing speed, which he views as their best asset, through an extremely high pace. And that means getting stops on defense and a more aggressive defense, I think, is what we've seen, getting more into the ball, having more active hands, jumping passing lanes a little bit more, in an attempt to force turnovers and be more aggressive on the defensive end for the sake of increased transition opportunities. It feels like is what we've seen. And Gentry's going to get an opportunity to really implement that and find what he views as his ideal rotation to get that done on a night-to-night basis. I still think that he's favored Len over Thompson a little bit, but that could just be based on the chances that we've seen. Or the opponents that they've gone up against. So we'll see kind of how he goes between those two guys. I don't know what to make of Terence Davis starting over Maurice Harkless because, again, Gentry said post-game that if they could get away with not playing Harkless, that they would do that. So there's a chance that Harkless is still his preferred starter, but we're going to have to see moving forward. But it is notable that Terence Davis has played really well recently. I played the last clip, his post-game clip in the last episode, which, by the way, I totally messed up and meant to only include his first question and put the whole frickin' post-game conference. So my bad there, getting used to kind of putting these clips in. But the last 5 games for Terence Davis, he's played really well. 17.6 points, along with 4.5 rebounds and 1 steal per game. And this is just under 24 minutes, 53% from the field, 44% from 3. And that's on 6.8 threes per game. And like I said, yeah, just played extremely well in these last 5 games. He's started in all of them. That does include the Orlando game, because prior to that, he was averaging just over 5 points in about 14 minutes on 30% from the field and 20% from 3 on 4 attempts from downtown per game. So Terence Davis really emerging has been big for this team. We talked about this team needing more spacing, and Terence Davis obviously supplies that. He's been decent on the defensive end. I think that you could want more from him. I think that his shot selection hasn't been great. We've heard, I believe, Gentry talk about, getting TD to pick his spots a little bit better. And I think that's something that he's still working on. But it's easy to forget that this is only Terence Davis's 3rd year in the NBA. So he's still going to be kind of working through those things. He's 24 years old because he was older when he came out of college, came out of Ole Miss, but still, it's going to be a little bit of a learning process. Like Terence Davis is a young NBA player, and I think it's easy to forget about that. And it's been important that Terence Davis has shined in these last 5 games because while he shot extremely well, Buddy Hield is going through what I'm pretty damn sure is the worst shooting stretch of his career. In the last 5 games, he's averaged 24 minutes, which is extremely low as well, by the way. 3 games in a row now where TD has played more minutes than Buddy. And in those 24 minutes for Buddy throughout the last 5 games, 7.6 points on, are you ready for this? 24% from the field and 12% from three on 6.6 attempts a game. Whoa. Buddy is MIA right now. It's now 5 games in a row where he hasn't made more than 1 3. At Memphis, 1 of 9. Against the Lakers, 1 of 6. At LA against the Clippers, 0 of 3. At home against the Clippers, 1 of 5. And at home in most recent game against Orlando, 1 of 10. Buddy is missing. And missing from the game, and I guess missing from 3. Unintentional there. But man, to hardly even be playing while he's out there, this is different for Buddy. And I think that it's going to be interesting to see how he bounces back. Like, I would guess that Buddy's confidence isn't wavered at all by this. You know, he is struggling obviously on the year when you're talking about only, what are we, I believe 25 games into the year. I'm talking about a 5-game sample where he's shooting that horrific percentage that I mentioned earlier from 3. So him being down to 35% on the year is going to be largely impacted by a stretch like this. And I'm sure that he'll get this back up. But I think that my main takeaway here is that, you know, I've talked about it on this pod, and I've heard it talked about understandably a lot in a couple different places, is like, oh, well, can this team trade Buddy because do they have enough shooting after that? And, you know, maybe TD shooting can't be relied upon. Maybe he's going to be a streaky guy for his entire career, but he's on right now and it's helping. HB needs to get more 3-point attempts up. Tyrese needs to get more 3-point attempts up. So if those guys are able to do that, I mean, I think that helps fill in for a potential idea to move on from Buddy. Davion Mitchell's 3-point shooting has been subpar, but I think that he should be expected to come around a little bit more. His off the dribble shooting, by the way, has been really, really good. We've heard a lot recently. There's a chance I write on this, but we heard a lot last post game of Fox and Haliburton talking about how they feel like how the game is slowing down for Davion now, about how he's reaching that point. And his pull-up jumper has been really impressive in the recent games. Yeah, he is at 28.3% from deep on the season. But I think that what we've seen recently from Davion is him looking a little bit more comfortable. You know, 18 points in this game, only 2 in the last game against the Clippers. But then in the game prior to that, he had 20. He had 18 and 4 in this last game. Throughout the last 5 games for Davion, he's averaging 11.8 points, 3.4 assists on 43% from the field and 31% from 3. So he seems to be coming around a little bit. We'll see what type of 3-point shooter he is. I mean, the team can't survive without spacing the floor without Buddy Hield, I guess is the point. I don't know that I'm not confident that they won't have stretches where they really struggle, but I think also the idea is that whoever you would be potentially moving Buddy for at the deadline is a capable 3-point shooter themselves. They don't have to be elite, but they have to not be below average, probably. Maybe not has to be, because if you want to talk about someone like Ben Simmons, obviously he's so damn impactful in other aspects of the game that, like, you're going to struggle to shoot the ball or with spacing issues, and that's something that you have to deal with. So have to isn't the right word. Sabonis is another example, right? But I think that if they can, it would be really helpful for this roster. But if they're talented enough in other aspects, then that's something that you definitely can be willing to overlook, because the team has shown that are capable of surviving with Buddy Hield going through this really tough stretch. Again, not sure how much that has to do with Terence Davis just being on an up right now. If he's a guy that's going to have a lot of ups and downs throughout his career, he's definitely on an up right now. So we'll see if maybe he can find some sort of consistency to be a mid 30s 3-point shooter. He's definitely not going to stay to the cold slump that we saw at the beginning of the year, but I think the recent stretch has also been a little hot for him. So we'll see kind of where he evens out to, and I think that's going to be a big difference here. Yeah, like I said, Fox played ridiculously well. He looks to be coming around. Haliburton was really confident. I think that the team needs to be better on defense. Haliburton is part of that. But I think the confidence that I'm talking about, and he was really good deflections, especially in the first half of this game. I'm just kind of a little bit of a joke there for anyone aware, I guess. And the beginning of the fourth quarter, the one other aspect that stood out to me a lot for Haliburton, I think Fox pointed it out as well, is that if guys go under screens on Haliburton, I feel like he should be pulling it every time. I think that his release might be a little bit slow. That's something that's going to recognizing that right away and just pulling it instantly the second that you see that's happening, I think takes time to understand, recognize, and capitalize on in a brief second. And I think that's something that Haliburton's getting used to. We saw it a couple times at the beginning of the fourth quarter specifically that stood out to me. He played phenomenally, 18 points, 11 rebounds in that game against Orlando, 3 steals. There's 2 blocks in there, 6 of 9 from the field, 5 of 6 from 3. And he knocked down his only free throw as well. Haliburton played phenomenal in this one. And I love specifically that aggression that we saw from him at the beginning of the fourth and taking his own shot. And there felt like probably about a 4-minute stretch where it was either him scoring or assisting on the scoring basket and just completely in control of the game. That was one of those stretches where you're just like, okay, maybe Haliburton can be a All-Star at some point in his career. So that was great to see. I think the other notable thing here, and we'll see how this changes with Harkless returning, Alvin Gentry did say that Marvin Bagley would still be in the rotation even when Barnes and Harkless do return, because, and he specifically pointed to the rebounding that Bagley has brought. And obviously that's something that the team has really struggled with throughout this season. But Bagley's also done a good job shooting from 3. And Gentry also pointed to, he felt like Bagley doesn't get enough credit for keeping himself ready. So these last 2 games, Bagley played about 19 minutes in each of them. In the first one against the Clippers, he had 12 points and 11 rebounds, 4 of 6 from the field shooting. He missed his only 3, but knocked down all 4 free throw attempts. And then in the most recent game against Orlando, again, just over 19 minutes, also 12 points and had 6 rebounds to go with it, a steal, and he shot 4 of 8 from the field, including 2 of 4 from 3 and 2 of 2 from the free throw line. 4 offensive rebounds in the home game against the Clippers and 2 offensive rebounds in the home game against Orlando. He probably deserves, 2 or 3 more throughout that 2-game stretch, credit for rebounds that he ended up, making difficult for the opposition, where maybe I can think of a Mo Bamba one that, because Bagley was down there battling on the offensive glass, that it slipped out of Bamba's hands and led to a second chance opportunity for the Kings. Bagley's playing a role, which is something that's new. Tim had a great article on the Kings Herald about this recently that he just put up today at the time of recording this. It's been really encouraging what we've seen from Bagley, that he's filled this role. He's extremely active on the glass. Obviously, he moves in transition extremely well, which is, again, the emphasis of the Sacramento Kings roster right now. So there's a chance that Bagley remains in the rotation. It looks like he's going to get his opportunity, at very least, to continue to make a case for that rotation spot as Harkless returns. So we'll see what that ends up looking like. I'm curious if Bagley gets played at the 5 at all. We saw that very, very briefly in one of these games since Gentry took over. I forget which one, but it was so brief that it's probably not very notable. But we're going to see. Hopefully that Holmes is all right and gets to come back soon here. Like I mentioned, Gentry's dealt with so many injuries since taking over, and I think him getting an opportunity to, again, build a consistent rotation where has some continuity. Like Gentry specifically was a guy that pointed out how important continuity is for guys. It wasn't unprompted. I did ask him about this, but the quote that I got from Alvin when asking about the importance of continuity with Barnes and Harkless around the corner, he said, quote, anytime you can have continuity, it's going to be much, much better because guys know exactly what their roles are. They know the expectations that are there for them, when they're going to come on the floor, and what their role is. I just think it's easier on the players. So those guys getting a little bit of an understanding. And I think that also, Fox and Haliburton knowing who is playing alongside them and their roles being a little bit more clearly defined, like Harrison Barnes understanding that his role needs to be to get up a whole lot of threes on top of everything else that we've seen from him, but have a quick trigger from three, no matter if it's Mo Harkless or Chimezie Metu next to him, but also which one of those guys could make it a little bit more clear for him. I think a chance for continuity and a consistent roster would be really important for Gentry. We've seen him do well during his time. I like the changes that we've seen implemented, a extremely high pace and aggressive defense that is very disruptive. I think that was probably the theme of the last episode here. That was the wording that Fox used. And we saw a lot of talk about wanting to force more turnovers, which we've seen happen a little bit here and pushing the pace nonstop. So now the Kings are sitting at the 10 seed, 11-14 is their record after 25 games, which is about 30% of the way through the season here. That has them 2 games out of the 6th seed, by the way, 3 games out of the 4 seed. And their upcoming stretch of games is a road trip that should be favorable. They play in Charlotte on Friday and then have a back-to-back in Cleveland. And then on Monday, they play in Toronto before coming home for 3 games. So I would think that the Kings are favored in most of these games. Cleveland's dealing with a few issues. Charlotte is going to be interesting because we don't know if their guys are going to be back from COVID health and safety protocols. So there was a lot of guys there. I want to say it was Terry, LaMelo, Ish Smith, and 1 or 2 more players who have been inactive for them recently because of health and safety protocol. So we're still yet to find out if those guys will be available for the Kings showdown in Charlotte on Friday. Like I mentioned, Cleveland has been playing well, but I think that the Kings still should be favored in that one. I believe that Evan Mobley is going to be unavailable because he's out for a significant stretch. And then they play in Toronto, and that one probably should be a little bit closer when it comes to just kind of like predictions or who's going to be favored. But like I mentioned, the Kings are 2 games out of the 6th seed, and they're playing well going into what is a subpar competition level on this road trip. But it's not the first time we've heard the team is going on a road trip feeling good against some not great opponents. So we know what happened last time that we were able to say those things. Hopefully this stretch turns out a lot better for the Kings. I think that they have some positive momentum rolling forward. Hopefully they can stay healthy because recently since Gentry's taken over, like I mentioned, that has not been the case. But if they're able to stay healthy, get a little bit of consistency and really fully buy into this identity of being an aggressive, disruptive defense that encourages more transition opportunities and just be obsessed with pushing the pace every single night. And Barnes and Haliburton are getting up threes at a great rate. Fox remains aggressive. That there's a decent formula here for the Kings. They should be favored to make this play-in spot. But the extreme up and downs that we saw throughout Walton's entire tenure, I don't think that they fully go on Walton, but hopefully that doesn't happen under Gentry. Hopefully he can find a little bit more consistency, and a lot of that, again, is going to have to do with guys remaining healthy. So knock on wood, hopefully that happens. This was an encouraging performance from the Kings against the Magic. Their perimeter containment was bad as the Magic kind of had a 5-out offense, but Sacramento's own offense was just phenomenal in this one. So at very least, it was encouraging. Like I said, there's probably the best. I'm going to use this word, I guess. There's the best vibes right now in that Orlando game, coming off that Orlando game that I feel like we've had all season. I guess like game winner earlier in the year against Phoenix is probably up there. Obviously, it's a game winner, but the energy and just level of fun that the guys looked like they were having on the floor in that Orlando game was encouraging. And hopefully they can keep this up moving forward on the road trip. If you haven't noticed, kind of my recording schedule has become recording every post game, except for when it's back to back, recording the second night of that back to back. So you can expect another episode on Sunday after the Kings play in Charlotte and in Cleveland on Friday and Saturday back to back there. Yeah. If you enjoyed this episode of the Kings Pulse podcast, definitely be sure to check out all the work at the Kings Herald, because Gentry's chance to establish some continuity and consistency in his roster is pretty much directly from an article that I wrote there. I referenced Tim's article today of Bagley kind of promisingly emerging and finding a role on the Sacramento roster. Tim broke that down extremely well as on the website as well. And there's great stuff there from the guys and gals on that website, myself included, all the time. So definitely take a look at the Patreon there to support local independent Kings coverage. And if you enjoyed this episode of the Kings Pulse podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review. And you'll hear from me again in the next couple of days.